Make them pop the pills and they'll keep walking. That's the Kremlin's new approach to getting its soldiers to push forward on suicidal runs into Ukraine's kill zones, as Russia has introduced a strategy pulled straight out of a horror movie. It's pink. It's easily swallowed, sniffed, or injected, and it's turning Russian soldiers into mindless zombies who only exist to walk forward until they take a bullet to the head. This is the worst thing that the Kremlin has ever done to Russia's army, and it's left soldiers suffering a fate worse than death before death finally comes. Let's transport ourselves into a mind of a Russian soldier for a moment. Having been pushed to the front lines long before you were ready, your commander issues an order to assault a Ukrainian position. The problem, you're literally miles away from that position, and you know that your future amounts to trying to sneak through a huge kill zone patrolled by drones and who knows what else. You know you're not coming back. You've seen dozens of your comrades sent in the direction that your commander is sending you, and all contact has been lost with them. Death awaits. You're terrified. And that's when your commander gives it to you, a little pink pill that he tells you will make all your fears disappear. With no other option, the pill goes down the hatch, and you feel its effects wash over you in a second. You're calm now. Too calm. So calm that you don't even care what happens to you as you march into the kill zone. You don't know it yet, you barely know anything at this point, but that pill has turned you into a zombie who exists for the sole reason to soak up some of Ukraine's ammo. Locked in twisted bliss, you trudge forward, barely even registering when a Ukrainian drone finds you and comes bearing down. Death comes, but the reality is that you were already gone long before. The little pink pill led you here, and more of your comrades will follow. This is Russia's new strategy for winning the war in Ukraine, and it can be summed up in one word: Pervitin. Those who know their World War II history will have immediately felt their ears perk up at the sound of that word. But before we get into why that is, Ukraine Today reports that Ukraine has revealed that Pervitin is running rampant through Russia's military, and that is the Kremlin's design. The outlet reports on comments made by medics of the 1st Separate Assault Regiment, who have revealed for the first time that Russian military isn't fueled by patriotism for Putin's cause, or even the massive amounts of cash that are being splashed about by the Kremlin to convince Russian people to sign their lives away in Ukraine. Drugs are the answer, and Pervitin is the drug of choice. One of the Ukrainian Armed Forces medics in question reveals all, stating, "Pervitin is one of the first amphetamines used by the Germans during World War II. It allows you to stay awake for days, and feelings of fear and pain disappear." We're going to dig into those comments in a few moments, but those who perked up at the earlier mention of Pervitin now know exactly why. It's a Nazi drug, and it amounts to a massive dose of methamphetamine distilled into a small pink pill. What we're seeing here is that the Kremlin is taking its cues from Nazi Germany, which sounds about right for what Putin is trying to do. The Nazis ran rampant over Europe, starting with an invasion of Poland that forced the rest of Europe to stand up and take notice. Putin's invasion of Ukraine shares many parallels, though it's been far less successful. So the revelation that a Nazi drug is behind the seeming willingness of so many of Russia's soldiers to sacrifice themselves for Putin's cause makes a strangely perfect type of sense. There is both hypocrisy and irony in what we're seeing from Russia's soldiers. On the hypocrisy front, the National World War II Museum points to how the Nazis loaded their soldiers up on Pervitin, even as the Nazi regime preached the virtues of clean living and purity in all things. Putin's hypocrisy is different. He tries to claim Russia as some sort of multicultural paradise. Euronews reported back in 2023. But that's just a smokescreen, an attempt by a dictator to create a narrative of a country that doesn't exist. The reality of what Russia has truly become is now being expressed on the front lines as meth-head soldiers amble to their inevitable deaths. Unsleeping, unwavering, and unfearing, these soldiers are Putin's zombies, and that is all that he wants them to be. As for the irony front, remember this. Putin claims that the denazification of Ukraine is one of his primary objectives with the supposed special military operation. Russia's leader has made that claim many times, including during a June 2024 visit to the Leningrad Siege Memorial, where he tried to claim that Ukraine glorifies Hitler and his barbaric regime. The followers of Nazi executioners, whatever they call themselves today, are doomed, Putin said during that visit. And yet here Putin is, following the Nazi playbook right down to forcing meth-based pills down the throats of Russia's terrified soldiers. The reality in all of this is that the secret of Russia's endurance in Ukraine has been revealed, not in terms of the manpower advantage that Russia still holds, but in terms of what seems to be the seemingly unending capability of Russian soldiers to throw themselves at defenses that they know will destroy them in short order. Tetiana Chornovol, who is a platoon commander with the Ukrainian military, reveals more. According to Euromaidan Press, she says that Russian prisoners of war have presented a pink substance to their captors, which they have reported having been told to take before they head to their positions. After taking it, a soldier feels a surge of energy, no cold, no pain, no fear, and this allows him to act like a machine, calmly wait for a drone to arrive and shoot it at the last moment or hide behind a tree, Chornovol says. However, this calmness is a detriment. With no sense of urgency to drive their survival instincts, Russia's meth-addled zombie soldiers are accidentally making themselves targets for Ukraine. Chornovol reveals an instance where Ukraine was forced to expend 15 drones on a pair of Russian occupiers who survived for so long on sheer dumb luck rather than due to any combat training. A grenade dropped from a Ukrainian Mavic explodes a meter behind his back, and he, like a zombie, keeps moving forward without flinching. An FPV drone flies in, and at the last moment he calmly hides behind a tree, she recounts. This is what Russia's army has been reduced to. Unflinching bullet sponges who try to advance in their zombie state, but are clearly incapable of operating the way they need to if they're going to make any substantial gains in Ukraine. But then that's the point, and it's precisely why the Kremlin is allowing this drug to be used in the Russian military. This move will have severe consequences, not only for Russia's army, but for the entire country. But before we dig into that, we need to take a closer look at why Russia has been forced to rely on a drug that Hitler and his Nazi cronies brought to the fore over 80 years ago. There are plenty of clues in the quotes that we've already shared, particularly the mentions of pain, fear, and fatigue suppression. Ukraine Today says that when under the influence of Pervitin, Russia's soldiers can conduct assaults while barely even registering the injuries that they sustain until something happens that puts them out of the fight permanently. Russian soldiers are taking the drug voluntarily, the outlet adds, which only goes to show how horrifying the Ukraine war is for the people whom Putin has pushed into his war. They would rather be dumb to it all and die without even realizing that they're being killed than maintain their senses and actually try to follow some sort of strategy. Not that they could follow a strategy, Russia barely has one. The problem that Pervitin solves, if you can call turning soldiers into zombies a solution, exists because Russia has created those problems for itself. Reports of exhausted soldiers struggling with the conditions in Ukraine date back to almost the beginning of the war. For instance, June 2022 saw The Guardian report that Russian soldiers were already going public with appeals to Putin himself to investigate the battlefield conditions they faced. Given our continuous presence and the fact that amongst our personnel there are people with chronic medical issues, people with mental issues, many questions arise that are ignored by the higher-ups at headquarters, one soldier said in a video released at the time. Another said that soldiers in Ukraine were desperately trying to stave off exhaustion and that the combination of hunger, cold, and a lack of supplies was all feeding into their being unable to do the jobs that they thought they were supposed to be doing. It's almost 4 years since those videos were released, and one thing has become abundantly clear: these conditions were by the Kremlin's design. We'll dig deeper into what that means soon, but before we do, this is a quick reminder that you are watching The Military Show. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to hit the button. Things have gotten far worse for Russia's soldiers since the early months of Putin's invasion. Now they can expect to receive barely any training before they are dumped on the front lines and told to run headlong into kill zones. That was revealed in a February 10th report by United 24 Media, which carried comments made by a Russian recruit who had somehow managed to survive the brutality of the military that the Kremlin has created. After all the medical checkups, they asked me if I was ready to go to the military base the day after tomorrow, the soldier, who goes by the name Ivan, claimed, before adding, "They trained us for 5 days, we waited for another 5 days for a force rotation, and then we went to combat positions." The same was true of Russia's Storm Z unit, which is made up of soldiers who have traded time in prison for fighting in the Ukraine war. They typically receive between 10 and 15 days of training before they're off to the front. And once these untrained soldiers arrive, they quickly learn what happens if they refuse to accept their fate of going on the suicidal runs into kill zones that their commanders expect. As the BBC reported on February 24th, Russian commanders are killing soldiers who refuse their ludicrous orders, and these executions are being done in front of the other soldiers, likely to deliver a message. "I see it, just 2 meters, 3 meters, click, click, bang," one of Putin's patsies said in a documentary, where he revealed that the murderous commander in question was made a hero of Russia back in 2024. This isn't abhorrent behavior to Putin, it's what he expects from his commanders, as the Kremlin is doing nothing more than sending meat to be pushed into the grinder that Putin has created. You're killed if you do, and you're killed if you don't. So, faced with all of that, is it any surprise that so many of Russia's soldiers are voluntarily taking a meth-based drug just so they can get high enough to not care about any of it? They know they're dying. Once in Ukraine, they see that they only have one way out. Better to die as a zombie with the Kremlin's approval than to get killed by a commander or deal with the unspeakable terror of watching a Ukrainian drone arrive to shred you to pieces. No wonder Ukraine is finding it on the bodies of dead soldiers and in the possession of those that it takes as prisoners of war. When you search everyone, you find syringes and pipettes, members of Ukraine's military have said, according to Ukraine Today. Ampoules filled with stimulants are also common, so it looks like the Kremlin doesn't care about how it gets meth into the systems of its soldiers as long as the drug is getting there and creating the zombies who will mindlessly walk until they're put down by gunshots or gruesome explosions that stop them from walking. Again, this is all approved by Putin and his cronies. But what Russia's president doesn't seem to realize is that state-approved drug use is only a short-term fix for the many morale and fear problems that run through the Russian army. What Putin is really doing is creating an absolute nightmare of a future, both for his military and for Russia itself. Stick with us to the end of the video and we'll explain the horror that awaits Russia when the army of zombies, or at least what's left of it, comes back home. First, there are the many drug-related problems the Russian military is dealing with while it's in Ukraine. Beyond the Pervitin, Russian soldiers are actively using opioids as crutches that improve their mental states on the front lines. Again, it's about getting high when faced with horror. If you zone out on heroin or methadone, you're not going to care all that much when you're sent on a suicide run, and the inevitable happens during your assault. But it gets much worse than that. The constant use of drugs by Russian soldiers on the front lines is naturally turning into addiction. This was reported as far back as 2023 by The Hill, which revealed that Russia wasn't screening its recruits for drug use as Putin desperately tried to push more meat onto the battlefield. The massive signing bonuses and wages that Russia is paying to its soldiers are also making it easier for troops to get their hands on drugs, whether that's Pervitin or whatever else the soldier needs to make it through another day of drone-filled hell. Reports also say that untrained conscripts were sent drugged as disposable troops in human waves to disclose Ukrainian positions and prepare the ground for better trained units, The Hill reported in 2023. Drug convictions among Russia's soldiers are on the rise, even though the Kremlin clearly wants its soldiers to be high as kites. Talking Drugs says that the number of Russian military personnel convicted for drug-related offenses rose by 50% in 2023 compared to the previous year. That's fine for Putin too. We told you earlier that Russia recruits from prison, so maybe we're seeing a vicious cycle of getting soldiers hooked so that they end up in prison and trading their sentences for another stint in Ukraine. The same outlet said in November 2024 that the UK Ministry of Defence claimed that 15% of Russian soldiers fighting in Ukraine were on drugs of some kind. The drugs are clearly having an effect too. In November 2025, Business Insider reported that almost 300 Russian soldiers had died due to either drugs or bad food during the previous 2 years. So it looks like some of Russia's zombies aren't even making it into the kill zones to get shot. Russia's military is clearly crumbling from the inside due to this drug abuse. But let's switch back to Russia itself. Right now, Putin is already facing a drug epidemic that is ravaging Russia on its own turf. There are plenty of signs that this is happening. In January 2025, the Moscow Times reported that cocaine smuggling had risen tenfold in Russia since Putin launched his illegal war. And this only accounts for the amount of cocaine that Russian authorities are catching coming into the country. As the outlet reports, the period between 2023 and 24 saw those authorities seize about 5.2 tons of cocaine, which had a value of about $3.4 billion. Cocaine itself isn't widely used in Russia, as cheaper synthetic drugs are preferred. But what this shows us is that Russia is becoming a major transit hub for the drug, likely due to the closures of Ukrainian ports caused by Putin's invasion. More drugs flowing into Russia means more criminals in the country who are selling and manufacturing drugs. About 8 months after the Moscow Times published its report, the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine revealed that there are about 6 million drug addicts in Russia right now, though 18 million people either use drugs periodically or have experience with them. Of the addicts, 20% are children aged between 9 and 13, with another 60% aged between 16 and 30. Are we seeing the impact of Putin's war on the children of those sent to the front here? The brothers of those who are dying and may soon find themselves in Ukraine too. It's difficult to say, but it's clear that Russia has a growing drug problem among its younger people. Now think about this. Russia is already a powder keg of drug use among the youth of the country who are looking for their next fix. But what happens if the Ukraine war ends tomorrow? Suddenly, Russia has around 700,000 soldiers streaming back into the country, many of whom are hooked on Pervitin or any number of other drugs. Those soldiers are going to be dumped back into society after being made dependent on drugs to confront the horrors that they encounter in Ukraine, and they'll find those drugs. They're already being sold and will be manufactured in even greater quantities to fuel the demands of addicts who have been brutalized by their own country and seen the worst that life has to offer in Ukraine. That is Russia's future. Putin is trading what is to come for what he wants right now. And as more of Russia's soldiers fall into the zombie haze, the Kremlin isn't thinking about what comes next. Putin doesn't care, as long as Ukraine falls, and that's a long way away from happening. The horde of zombies coming back home is a problem to handle on another day. Putin thought that invading Ukraine would create a stronger Russia. But all he seems to do is find yet more ways to wreck the future of a country that is already teetering on the edge. After all, you can throw Putin's zombification of the Russian military into the mix of what Putin is doing to collapse Russia demographically. The long-term consequences of the war are even more terrible for Russia than we've covered here, and you can find out more if you watch our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more deep dives into what is really happening behind the scenes in Russia's military. And thank you as always for watching.